Part 26. The Best Physiognomist. Author, Yan Yun Yuchi. Chapter 251. In the affiliated hospital, in front of the emergency room. When Zhuang Jian returned to the ward to pick up the cat demon, Zhang Fengjai turned to look at the doctors involved in the rescue and gave instructions in a calm tone. Please go and get a vaccine that was injected into Yun'er. Why? Facing Zhang Fengjai's instructions, a doctor about 50 years old and wearing gold-rimmed glasses asked. Why? Zhang Fengjai asked with a slight frown. Why do you want to get the vaccine? Because I want to know the toxins contained in the vaccine, and then determine how to detoxify Yun'er, Zhang Fengjai replied patiently. Are you a doctor? Do you have a medical qualification certificate issued by the state? Do you have a medical practice certificate issued by the local health department? What do you mean? The other party did not rush to get the vaccine. Instead, he wasted time asking some irrelevant questions. This made Zhang Fengjai feel a little unhappy and asked with a gradually gloomy face. Answer my question first. Ignoring Zhang Fengjai's gloomy question, the optician demanded unceremoniously. My medical skills are inherited from my family. I don't have a medical qualification certificate or a medical practice certificate as you mentioned. After hearing Zhang Fengjai's answer, the other doctor and 4 nurses had a contemptuous sneer in their eyes. Only Guyu, who had seen Zhang Fengjai's superb medical skills and knew that he was no ordinary person, had a worried look in his eyes. As for the doctor with glasses who had been actively provoking him, he even asked loudly and with a serious face. Since you do not have a medical qualification certificate issued by the state, you are not qualified to practice medicine, so who gave you the courage to treat patients? Who gave you the courage to slander vaccines certified by medical institutions as containing highly toxic substances? I gave it to. When he saw a group of quack doctors who put his granddaughter to death, they dared to question the monk's background, and Zhang Fengjai, who was the only one who could save his granddaughter at this stage, suddenly slapped Rong Xiangtian in the wheelchair. When he was about to force his way forward, he was stopped by the man behind him. The daughter-in-law interrupted abruptly. Father, Director Chen's question just now was out of kindness. What if the boy in front of me is a liar? With the financial resources of our Rong family, it doesn't matter if we lose a little money, but it will make Yun'er have no peace after her death. After hearing his daughter-in-law's reminder, a trace of hesitation flashed in Rong Xiangtian's eyes. After all, how big Zhang Fengjai is and whether he can bring Yun'er back to life is all Zhuang Jian's decision. Zhang Fengjai didn't care at all about Rong Xiangtian's hesitation, but the middle-aged woman's repeated slanders and provocations completely aroused his strong murderous intention. However, before completely rescuing Yun'er, he could not punish her openly, so after temporarily suppressing the strong murderous desire in his heart, Zhang Fengjai looked directly at the doctor with glasses and asked. Since you are Director Chen, you will be the one to inject Yun'er with the vaccine. Yes, I injected the vaccine into Miss Rong, Director Chen proactively admitted. A cold light flashed in his eyes and he suddenly took a step forward. Zhang Fengjai shouted in a gradually rising voice. Then I want to ask you now, have you done a comprehensive examination on Yun'er before injecting her with the vaccine? Of course I did. Since you have undergone a comprehensive examination, why do you, who is qualified to practice medicine, inject Yun'er with vaccines against common sense of treatment? What do you mean? Zhang Fengjai asked loudly, causing Director Chen to frown and ask. Seeing that the cause of the other party's medical accident was exactly the same as what he had guessed in advance, Zhang Fengjai, who was already confident in his heart, shouted sternly while taking another step forward. If you had done a comprehensive examination, you should have known that in addition to the cat's claw marks, Yun'er had also been injected with drugs with hallucinogenic effects. So why did you take the risk of injecting the vaccine? Impossible. Not to mention intravenous drugs, even if you have taken common cold medicine, you cannot randomly inject vaccines within 24 hours. Because this is not only a joke on the patient's life, but also a serious violation of medical practice regulations, which requires medical and legal responsibility. Therefore, Director Chen immediately shook his head and denied it. At the same time, Rong Xiangtian, whose face suddenly turned gloomy, turned to look at his daughter-in-law and asked, "You Rong, do you know that Yuner has been injected with drugs?" The middle-aged woman, with a flash of astonishment in her eyes, shook her head quickly. "Father, I really don't know. Otherwise, I wouldn't have been able to ask Director Chen to inject Yuner with the vaccine." Staring hard at his daughter-in-law's eyes, he found that except for the look of shock, there was no guilt or panic. This made Rong Xiangtian secretly breathe a sigh of relief, and at the same time, he immediately winked at a strong man in black with a feminine temperament. Afterwards, the strong man in black with a feminine temperament turned around and left the scene. Faced with Director Chen's denial, Zhang Fengjai immediately turned around and picked up Yuner's wrist, then pointed at a red spot on her arm and asked with a sneer, "Director Chen, look at what this is." With more than 20 years of medical experience and director-level medical skills, Director Chen recognized at a glance that the red dot on Yuner's arm was the needle hole used for intravenous injection of poison. This made his face instantly pale. His legs were weak and he fell directly to the ground. Whether it is the psychological shock of fear now, the subsequent medical accident investigation, or the bloody revenge of the Rong family afterwards, it all indicates that Director Chen's life is completely over. Therefore, Zhang Fengjai, who had no further thoughts of punishing the other party, raised his head and gave instructions to Guyu, whom he had met once before. "Can I go get a vaccine now?" "I'll go now." Ignoring the opinions of the experts around him, Guyu nodded quickly and walked towards the stairs quickly. She turned around and stood in front of the hospital bed, slowly closed her eyes, and took advantage of the time between Zhuang Jian and the ancient jade to take the medicine to rethink the treatment method. Looking at Zhang Fengjai, who was contemplating with his eyes closed, Rong Mok's beautiful eyes that had been looking at him revealed a strange brilliance. If purely based on appearance and family status, Zhang Fengjai, who has very ordinary appearance and clothing, is the kind of ordinary person who can't be found in the crowd, and will never attract her attention at all. Interest. But the concentration he used when checking Yuner's condition just now, and the sharpness and domineering way he countered Director Chen's questioning made Rong Mok discover some of his ordinary advantages. Of course, this little advantage only made her slightly interested, but it was still a long way from impressing her heart. The Best Physiognomist. Author, Yan Yun Yuqi. Chapter 252. In the affiliated hospital, in front of the emergency room. Rong Xiangtian, who did not take the initiative to stand up to support Zhang Fengjai at the critical moment, turned his head and glared at his daughter-in-law, blaming her for being smart and stupid just now, and was ready to express his apology to Zhang Fengjai. But at this moment, Zhuang Jian suddenly rushed out from the stairwell quickly, and handed the cat demon directly to him and said, "Zhang Fengjai, the Burmese cat is here." After opening his eyes and taking the cat demon, Zhang Fengjai took out the silver needle from his sleeve and pierced it directly into the cat demon's abdomen, then pulled out the silver needle stained with a trace of cat demon's blood, and used the sky eye to observe carefully. After confirming the highly toxic components in the cat demon's blood, Zhang Fengjai directly reached out and peeled off the talisman attached to it. Then, the cat demon, which was instantly freed from the seal, immediately waved its claws to grab the artery on his wrist, and its tail, as strong as a whip, also whipped towards his temple. In response, Zhang Fengjai used the physical strength that he had mobilized in advance without panic, and suddenly pinched the cat demon's neck, making it lose its counter-attack power instantly. At the same time, his right hand was as fast as the wind and tapped its limbs and back. After using the acupuncture point sealing technique to completely fix the cat demon, he threw it directly onto the bed. So beautiful, so pitiful. Because the cat demon's head was facing Rong Mok, When she saw the cat demon's blue diamond-like eyes and the very human look of fear, she immediately felt love and pity, and couldn't help but want to reach out and touch it. "If you are not afraid of death, just touch it," Zhang Fengjai immediately scolded Rong Mok for his reckless behavior. "If you don't want to touch it, then don't touch it. Why scare me?" Rong Mok, who quickly withdrew her jade hand, thought of Zhang Fengjai's cold attitude and scolding tone just now, and immediately complained very aggrievedly. Ignoring Rong Mok's complaints, Zhang Fengjai turned his head to look at the quickly returning Guyu, and immediately reached out to take the vaccine she handed over, and then used the sky eye to analyze the composition of the vaccine. Zhuang Jian took the opportunity to walk to Rong Mok's side, whispered to her about the origin and harm of the cat demon, and explained Zhang Fengjai's good intentions for scolding just now. Through the analysis of the demon cat's toxicity and the composition of the vaccine, and combined with Yunus' condition, Zhang Fengjai has basically determined the way to dissolve the toxicity. However, before taking action, he has a more important thing to do. Putting the vaccine next to the cat demon, Zhang Fengjai walked to Rong Xiangtian and said with confidence on his face, "Old man, I already have a way to bring Yunus back to life." "Great." Rong Xiangtian, with joy in his eyes, clenched his fists and asked excitedly, "Then I'll trouble you to use your miraculous medical skills to save Yunus' life as soon as possible. No hurry." After shaking his head to refuse the request to take action immediately, Zhang Fengjai looked directly into Rong Xiangtian's eyes, and the confident look on his face was replaced by indifference, and asked, "Old man, you once promised me in person. If I can bring Yunus back to life, your Rong family will agree to any request I make, right?" "That's right," Rong Xiangtian immediately nodded and admitted. "In that case, then I have a request now." "Please speak," Rong Xiangtian quickly corrected his attitude and gestured. Turning his head to look at Rong Mok, who had regained his calm after being comforted by Zhuang Jian, Zhang Fengjai showed a strange smile. This also made Rong Mok's mood, which had just calmed down, suddenly tense, and a panicked look appeared in her eyes. Because Rong Xiangtian made a promise to Zhang Fengjai that he would do it at all costs, she suddenly thought of what to do if the other party asked to marry her. After all, under the dual constraints of law and morality, she could only allow the other party to possess her as he pleased. Moreover, with the grace of the Rong family for raising her, she could neither refuse the request of the old man Rong, nor could she make the move of running away from marriage privately. Thinking of Zhang Fengjai's sinister intentions, facing his weird smile, the panic in Rong Mok's eyes was instantly replaced by fear, and her face, as smooth as powder, gradually turned pale. Seeing Rong Mok's face gradually turned pale because of fear, Zhang Fengjai's mouth corners slightly raised, and a trace of disdainful sneer flashed in his eyes. If it is said that at the beginning, the traps and conspiracies hidden in Rong Mok's conditions for being a girlfriend were not discovered, then, in the elevator, the other party continued to use the advantage of her beauty to test him, so that he could completely see the other party's sinister intentions. Therefore, the weird smile with ill intentions just now was just a profound lesson for the other party, letting the other party know that he was a person who could not be easily offended or teased. After putting away the weird smile on his face, Zhang Fengjai looked directly at the middle-aged woman, and then said with a cold expression, "Old man, my request is very simple, that is, let this woman kneel from the gate of the hospital to here, and then say sorry to me 3 times in person." After hearing the request made by Zhang Fengjai, everyone at the scene couldn't help but change their faces, and Rong Xiangtian even shouted with an unhappy face, "Young friend, why do you make such an excessive request? Old man, since you are very familiar with teacher Zhuang, you must know my other identity. I know, a cultivator inherited from the family, a top genius among the casual cultivators." Rong Xiangtian nodded and said, "Since you understand the inheritance of the cultivators, you should know that dignity is as important to us cultivators who have the power to call the wind and rain as the scales of a dragon. He took a step forward suddenly, and then with the gradually stimulated momentum of his own Danshan spiritual power, Zhang Fengjai roared murderously. As the old saying goes, if you touch the scales of a dragon, you will die. This woman has repeatedly provoked me, threatened me, and framed me. If it weren't for teacher Zhuang's request and obstruction, I would have made her bleed 3 feet and her head fall off. Now, just letting her kneel down and forgive her sins is already for the sake of the brotherhood between you and my second grandfather. Facing Zhang Fengjai's murderous roar, Zhuang Jian and Rong Mok showed a trace of thinking in their eyes, while Rong Xiangtian and the middle-aged woman showed angry flames in their eyes. And the 4 black-clothed strong men standing on both sides of Rong Xiangtian reached out to touch the real thing hidden in their waists. Without a trace of emotion, Zhang Fengjai swept his eyes over the 4 black-clad sturdy men who were ready to fight, and then he used his chi to smash the fire sign in front of him, and then threatened with a cold expression. I can guarantee that the moment you touch the gun, your fate will be like this green channel sign. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. The Best Physiognomist. Author, Yanyun Yuqi. Chapter 253. In the affiliated hospital, in front of the emergency room. Turning to look at the fire sign behind him that was smashed by Zhang Fengjai with his strength, Rong Xiangtian quickly raised his hand to signal the 4 strong men in black not to be reckless, then looked at Zhang Fengjai seriously and asked. Little friend, for some special reasons, I am very familiar with the Supernatural Research Institute where Captain Zhuang works. Whether they are high-level experts with the ability to control the wind or rain, or carefully cultivated genius elites, they neither have a sense of superiority over others, nor do they have any sense of superiority. Contempt the arrogance and arrogance of ordinary people. Why are you, a casual cultivator, so arrogant? Are you so bold? Are you so vengeful? Teacher Zhuang, now you know why I don't want to join the Supernatural Research Institute. Ignoring Rong Xiangtian's 3 consecutive questions, Zhang Fengjai turned to Zhuang Jian, who was deep in thought. In the thousands of years of Taoism's historical inheritance, perhaps some profound spiritual teachings will be lost, perhaps some powerful magic weapons will be destroyed, perhaps some practiced traditions will be forgotten, but there is a most truthful belief that has never been abandoned. That is to be immortal if you obey, and to be an immortal if you go against it. The monk seizes the spiritual energy of heaven and earth and integrates it into himself, and obtains the supernatural ability to control the wind and rain. This is a heaven-defying act in itself. If you don't adhere to the belief that you will become an immortal if you go against nature, not only will you not be able to step into the golden elixir path of the immortal realm, but sooner or later you will end up accomplishing nothing and returning to the mediocre path due to the cowardice of obedience. Zhang Fengjai's direct questions and reminders directed at the monk's heart made Zhuang Jian's face instantly pale. At the same time, she stepped back more than 10 steps and leaned against the wall, with a look of struggle in her eyes. But Rong Mok looked at Zhang Fengjai with a look of surprise. After retracting his gaze pointing at Zhuang Jian, Zhang Fengjai looked directly at Rong Xiangtian, who had a serious and selfless expression, and asked with a hint of contempt in his eyes. Old man, when you ask me why I am so proud of my talent, why I am so bold and arrogant, and why I must retaliate for my hatred, have you ever looked at yourself? What do you mean? Rong Xiangtian, whose face gradually darkened, asked in an unhappy tone. Pointing at the 4 strong men in black beside him, Zhang Fengjai said with a sneer. If you don't have a sense of superiority, why do you arrange so many bodyguards for personal protection? If you don't despise the audacity of ordinary people, why do you dare to let your bodyguards carry pistols? Pointing his finger at the middle-aged woman with vicious eyes, he continued to question. If you really believe that everyone is equal, then how dare this ignorant woman dare to provoke me and threaten me again and again? Facing Zhang Fenjai's repeated questioning that struck straight into his soul, Rong Xiangtian, who had long forgotten his original military responsibilities, lowered his head in silence. But the middle-aged woman, who had never really looked down on ordinary people in her heart, retorted forcefully. Everything our Rong family has now, we have to rely on our own abilities. Why can't we be superior to others? Why can't we be bold? Whether it is the medical skills that can bring Yunar back to life or the ability to control the wind and rain, they are all obtained through my hard work. So what qualifications and face do you have to question me? The middle-aged woman's unreasonable retort made Zhang Fenjai completely arouse the suppressed anger in his heart, and while shouting harshly, he used his mind to control his momentum and directly enveloped the middle-aged woman and 4 strong men in black. Faced with the pressure of the powerful aura inspired by her spiritual power, the middle-aged woman with an ordinary physique did not even hold on for a second before she knelt down in front of Zhang Fenjai. The 4 strong men in black, whose internal strength had reached the state of great success, only lasted less than 3 seconds before they also knelt down in front of him. My little friend, Luo Rong is the daughter-in-law of my Rong family after all. She represents the face of my Rong family. To have her kneel down in front of everyone in the hall is like a direct slap in my face, Rong Xiangtian. Decades of military career, the life and death experience of bullets, and the intrigues among the wealthy families in the imperial capital have long made Rong Xiangtian's mind as hard as a rock. After quickly getting rid of the questioning that hit his heart, he suggested with a calm expression. So, I hope you can change to a condition that is acceptable to both of you. In order to save his granddaughter, he can make a promise at all costs, but when faced with the damage to his dignity, he directly breaks the promise he made. He. After truly seeing Rong Xiangtian's shamelessness and insidiousness, Zhang Fenjai laughed in deep disappointment, then retracted the strong momentum that oppressed the middle-aged woman and bodyguards, then turned around and walked to the hospital bed, picked up the medicinal materials, and stepped forward. Head towards the stairs. Yunar has a trace of energy left by a peerless expert in her body. While protecting her heart from being eroded by poison, it can still maintain her vitality for a day and a night, so you'd better hire someone else as soon as possible. Seeing Zhang Jiyi walking away directly, Rong Xiangtian's eyes immediately showed hesitation and struggle. But when he saw his granddaughter Yunar in the hospital bed, and saw the countless blood blisters on Yunar's originally beautiful face, his hesitant and struggling expression was finally replaced by determination. But unfortunately, his hesitation and struggle just now allowed Zhang Fenjai to successfully pass through the corridor and enter the stairwell. Therefore, Rong Xiangtian immediately turned to Zhuang Jian and gave instructions. Captain Zhuang, please tell Zhang Fenjai that I, Rong Xiangtian, agree to his request and hope that he can save my granddaughter immediately. Hearing that Rong Xiangtian agreed to Zhang Fenjai's excessive request, the middle-aged woman who had just been helped up by the bodyguard instantly fell to the ground with a pale face. Grandpa Rong, I will go with Captain Zhuang. Following is ordinary, going against is immortal. The theory that Zhang Fenjai had just questioned Zhuang Jian not only resonated with Rong Mok, who had always been living under someone else's roof, but also had an impulse to break free from the shackles of fate. So, when she heard Rong Xiangtian's order, she took the initiative to propose. Because she wanted to tell Zhang Fenjai about her current situation and listen to his different views on her future destiny. Okay. Seeing the peerless beauty that even at his age could not control, Rong Xiangtian's eyes flashed with a gloomy cold light, and he quickly nodded in agreement. It was also a pity that when Zhuang Jian and Rong Mok desperately ran downstairs and rushed out of the outpatient building, they saw that the taxi Zhang Fenjai was riding in had already started to leave. They quickly took out their mobile phones to call, but the other party turned off the phone. The Best Physiognomist. Author, Yanyun Yuqi. Chapter 254. In front of the outpatient building of the affiliated hospital. Looking at the taxi that had disappeared from sight and Zhang Fengjai who refused to answer Zhuang Jian's call, Rong Mok immediately asked anxiously. Sister Yan, do you know where Zhang Fengjai lives? As for Zhang Fengjai's residence, she only knew Villa number 7 in Guanghe Huafu, but the owner of that villa was Zhu Zhenjun, and Zhang Fengjai only occasionally went there to live for a day or two. Moreover, she had a very strong feeling in her heart that Zhang Fengjai would never return to the villa area of Guanghe Huafu. So, Zhuang Jian simply shook her head to indicate that she didn't know. Rong Mok frowned and thought deeply for a while, and suddenly a gleam of light flashed in his eyes. He immediately waved to the bodyguard at the door of the hospital, and then turned his head to ask Zhuang Jian. Sister Yan, as a member of the Supernatural Research Institute, does your identity have the power to mobilize the law enforcement department for help? That's right, Zhuang Jian nodded in confusion. Then Sister Yan, you should call the leaders of the traffic department immediately and ask them to use the cameras on the roads to track Zhang Fengjai and the taxi and find out where he ended up. Is this appropriate? Zhuang Jian had thought about Rong Mok's method, but she knew better how cold and ruthless Zhang Fengjai could be when he was in a bad mood. She was worried that rashly tracking his whereabouts would cause Zhang Fengjai's displeasure and anger. Sister Yan, this is the only feasible way at present. Otherwise, you know the consequences of Grandpa Rong getting angry, Rong Mok reminded with a trace of fear in his eyes. Okay. Zhuang Jian, who was also afraid of Rong Xiangtian getting angry, nodded and agreed to Rong Mok's method, then directly called the traffic department and began to search for Zhang Fengjai in the name of assisting in tracking down the fugitive. But what was the final result? The traffic department started to play back from the camera closest to the affiliated hospital. In addition to finding the taxi they provided, they did not see Zhang Fengjai in the taxi. This also made Zhuang Jian immediately guess that Zhang Fengjai had mobilized his spiritual power to block the surveillance of the camera from the moment he took the taxi. After losing the only means to find Zhang Fengjai, Rong Mok and Zhuang Jian could only return to the emergency room helplessly and tell Rong Xiangtian the details. Arrogant and ignorant Junior, since you don't want to give me face, then don't blame me, Rong Xiangtian, for being cruel and ruthless. After hearing Rong Mok's reply, Rong Xiangtian, who was filled with endless anger, cursed with gritted teeth, and immediately signaled the bodyguard behind him to hand over the phone, then dialed a mysterious number, and communicated with a very respectful attitude. In less than 30 seconds, Rong Xiangtian, who hung up the phone, ordered Luo Rong. Immediately take people to the airport in the provincial capital to welcome a poison saint known as the King of Hell in the Yang world. Got it, Father. After nodding, Luo Rong immediately turned around and left happily with the bodyguard. Afterwards, Rong Dingtian continued to use his mobile phone to contact a mysterious strong man from the Supernatural Research Institute, asking him to send a top killer to Ningji City. After hanging up the phone, Rong Xiangtian instructed Rong Mok, who looked calm but was actually a little panicked. Mok, you will return to the family in Beijing immediately, and then go to the warehouse to get a 1,000-year-old ginseng, a 1,000-year-old snow lotus, a 700-year-old Ganoderma lucidum, and a 100-year-old Polygonum multiflorum, and escort them here in person. Yes, Grandpa. After nodding his head and responding, Rong Mok looked at Zhuang Jian with a worried look, then turned around and left quickly. Captain Zhuang, where is your cell phone? Rong Xiangtian asked indifferently, turning his head to look at Zhuang Jian, who showed a struggling look in her eyes. Zhuang Jian silently took out her cell phone and let the bodyguard take it away. Captain Zhuang, you will stay with me today and tomorrow. Using his spiritual power and the speed of the Qingfeng step, Zhang Fengjai used his spiritual power to shield the camera before Zhuang Jian chased him out of the outpatient building and took a taxi. He waited until he returned to the mansion of Roman Holiday before he calmed down his Danshan spiritual power and sat directly on the sofa. Looking at the medicinal materials placed on the coffee table, Zhang Fengjai's eyes showed a thoughtful look. After Rong Xiangtian took the initiative to tear up his promise, he knew that the other party was a sinister and cunning villain. Although he refused to save Yun'er, he also pointed out a clear way for the other party, but he was worried that the other party would not only not appreciate his kindness, but might even take revenge by repaying kindness with enmity. At the same time, judging from Zhuang Jian's behavior of obeying the other party's orders in everything, Rong Xiangtian has a deep influence on the Supernatural Research Institute. Therefore, if Rong Xiangtian chooses to repay kindness with enmity, he is likely to mobilize the masters of the Supernatural Research Institute. Thinking of this, Zhang Fenjai's face gradually became solemn, and a trace of worry flashed in his eyes. In order to defeat the security guard who had reached the foundation building stage and help Zhuang Jian capture the cat demon and rescue Yun'er, most of the energy given by the special beings in Shushan had been consumed. If the number of foundation building experts sent by the Supernatural Research Institute exceeds 4, then the life-saving trump card will completely lose its effect. Without the protection of the life-saving trump card, with his current cultivation and strength, he is no match for the foundation building experts. Unless there is help from outside forces. He suddenly stood up and walked to the windowsill. Looking at the Feng Shui treasure land that had been transformed by artificial means, he showed a thoughtful look in his eyes. When he followed his third grandfather to learn the theoretical basis of yin-yang 5 elements and Feng Shui pulse determination, his third grandfather once pointed to the cave that sealed those special beings and sighed. Human power is ultimately limited. Even the cultivators who have taken the essence of heaven and earth and integrated it into their own bodies, even the immortal gods who have stepped into the golden elixir road, also have the limit of endurance. But the power of heaven and earth is endless. If you can use some special techniques to borrow the power of heaven and earth, then you can break through your own limits and control the endless natural forces. And formations and spells are a means to borrow the power of heaven and earth. Since your own cultivation and strength are definitely not the opponent of the foundation building period strongman, why not use the help of Feng Shui formations and spells? Thinking of this, Zhang Fenjai immediately turned around and left the mansion and Roman holiday. First, he went to 3 shops that sold funeral clothes and bought a large amount of talisman paper, peachwood swords, paper-made boys and girls, and heavenly soldiers and generals. Then he went to the vegetable market and the dog market and bought 4 red-crowned roosters and 4 strong black dogs respectively. In the end, he spent 3 red tickets to transport all these things to the entrance of Daguan village. The Best Physiognomist. Author, Yan Yun Yuqi. Chapter 255. In front of the entrance of Daguan village. With the acceleration of the demolition and reconstruction project of the entire Lala village, the increasing amount of yin qi, resentment, and evil spirits in the place of yin leakage has caused more than 30 people in Daguan village to die due to accidents and sudden illnesses in just 1 month. At the same time, Zhulang Group also officially announced that it would abandon the development of Daguan village, which led to the villagers who had no hope and motivation to move out of Daguan village. At this time, Daguan village was already an empty village with no people. At this moment, Daguan village, under the gaze of the Sky Eye, has become a paradise for demons and monsters. Without rushing into the village to alarm the 9-headed monster, Zhang Fenjai directly killed chickens and dogs at the entrance of the village and bled them, and then used the mixed chicken blood and dog blood to draw a large number of ordinary 5-element exorcism talismans. It took 3 hours to draw a total of 9,999 5-element exorcism talismans, and Zhang Fenjai buried them in the 4 corners of the village. Then, he buried the 4 roosters in the 4 directions of the village, and a pair of boys and girls were placed on the graves of each rooster. Then, he took a deep breath, mobilized the spiritual power of Danshan to condense a sharp sword, and then stepped into the village. Shua. Just when he had just entered the village, only 16 meters away, a black shadow as fast as the wind flashed past his back, and then the shirt he bought from Zhening Wholesale Market was directly cut. In response, Zhang Fengjai continued to go deeper into the village without changing his expression, but just when his right foot was about to take the third step, the sword in his hand suddenly stabbed his left leg. Puff. Accompanied by a slight piercing sound, the cat demon who had attacked him in the night was directly pierced by the sword. There were 3 reasons why he fought the cat demon in the yard of Zhang Yiding's house in Lala village. First, his cultivation was only the 6th level of qi condensation at that time, which was only 1 level stronger than the cat demon. Secondly, Shen Loxi and Zhang Yiding were still living in the room at that time, so he didn't dare to use the powerful Taoist magic. Thirdly, although he had the ability of night vision, he was still at a disadvantage compared to the cat demon who was good at night action. But now, his cultivation level has been promoted to the 8th level of qi condensation, which has increased his strength by at least dozens of times. The deserted Daguan village allows him to act recklessly. At 5 o'clock in the afternoon, the sun was still high in the sky, leaving his sight unaffected. The mind stimulated the spiritual power in the sword, instantly strangled the soul and vitality of the cat demon, and threw the cat demon's body directly next to the black dog's body at the entrance of the village. When he turned around and prepared to continue to go deeper into the village, another black shadow bit his neck as fast as a gust of wind. He mobilized 90% of his physical strength in advance, so that his free left hand suddenly grabbed the black shadow, and then threw it to the ground with force, and quickly raised his right foot and suddenly stepped on the black shadow's head with force. This is a red snake less than 10 centimeters long, and its strength barely reaches the 3rd level of the qi condensation stage. When the red snake's body was kicked to the entrance of the village, 4 black shadows as fast as the wind attacked from the front, back, left and right. In response, Zhang Fengjai waved the sword in his hand without panic, and stabbed the 4 black shadows in the vital points with the sword style of autumn wind sweeping fallen leaves. Then, the 4 black shadows fell to the ground one after another. A hedgehog covered with thorns, a fox emitting a foul smell, a centipede with a length of nearly 30 centimeters, and a gray hare. When he stretched out his foot to kick the bodies of the 4 monsters to the entrance of the village, a weasel with purple and yellow hair, a dog as big as a calf, and a green giant python with a body length of nearly 5 meters quickly rushed out of the village and fled in different directions. In response, Zhang Fengjai, who retracted his right foot, did not chase them, but continued to go deep into the village to find the source of yin qi. Because he knew that after losing the protection of the yin-leaking land, even if Zhuang Jian had no time to hunt them down, the monsters and evil cultivators hiding in every corner of the city would never let go of the 3 monsters who relied on yin qi, resentment, and evil spirits to advance. After all, monsters are different from monsters and evil cultivators. They are similar to evil spirits and ghosts, and are foreign objects that are not allowed to appear in the world. After nearly 3 minutes of searching, he found the source of yin qi at the door of a small supermarket in the center of the village, a dry well that had been abandoned for who knows how many years. He stretched out his palm and placed it above the wellhead of the dry well. A kind of yin turbidity that could quickly corrode steel and iron bones made him look happy. Then, he mobilized the spiritual power of Danjin and performed the Qingfeng step to go straight to the village entrance, bringing the remaining peachwood swords, paper-made heavenly soldiers and generals, 4 black dogs and the bodies of 6 monsters to the dry well. First, the bodies of the 4 black dogs were buried around the dry well, and a pair of heavenly soldiers and generals were placed on the grave. Secondly, the bodies of 6 monsters were thrown into the dry well. Finally, the 15 wooden swords were neatly placed in the south of the dry well in the order of 1, 2, 4, and 8. After doing all this, Zhang Fengjai sat cross-legged in front of the dry well, behind the peachwood sword, while adjusting his peak state through meditation, and quietly waiting for the arrival of the strong man from the Supernatural Research Institute. In the VIP ward of the hematology department of the affiliated hospital, Rong Xiangtian, Rong Mok, Luo Rong, and Zhuang Jian all looked nervously at the bedside, where a woman in a black dress with a waisted long skirt, with an extremely charming figure, but with a fang ghost mask on her face. Because the woman in the black dress was taking Yuna's pulse. The pulse was not taken for a long time, only about a minute. After the woman in the black dress withdrew her slender jade hand, she turned her head and asked Rong Xiangtian. Did a cultivator who was proficient in medical skills see her before me? Yes. Rong Xiangtian nodded and explained hurriedly. Just 5 hours ago, a family inherited casual cultivator, a boy who didn't know the world, once took Yunar's pulse, but he used the means of bringing Yunar back to life to threaten my Rong family to agree to his very excessive request, which was finally rejected by me. Threat. Although covered by the mask, several people in the ward could feel the other party's frown. Rong Xiangtian, although I don't know what grudges your Rong family has with that cultivator, I can tell you clearly. The clear eyes that the mask could not hide revealed a trace of reminiscence, and the woman in black dress said with a slightly excited tone. If it weren't for that cultivator using the method of sealing the acupoints to force the cat demon's venom before the second mutation into the meridians, this little girl would have died of poison last night. If it weren't for that cultivator using his own spiritual power and a trace of essence energy in the little girl's body to maintain her remaining little vitality, she would have turned into a pool of poisonous water 4 hours ago due to the corrosion of the poison. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. The Best Physiognomist. Author, Yanyun Yuqi. Chapter 256. In the VIP ward of the hematology department of the affiliated hospital. When she heard the explanation of the woman in black, Zhuang Jian's eyes revealed a trace of self-blame, blaming herself for not following Zhang Fenjai's instructions and trying her best to stop Luo Rong from injecting Yunar with the vaccine. Otherwise, Zhang Fenjai would not have become enemies with the narrow-minded Rong Xiangtian and Luo Rong, and she would not have to be caught in the middle. A strange light appeared in Rong Mok's eyes. Because she didn't expect that Zhang Fenjai would still protect Yunar softly after being humiliated by Luo Rong, and Rong Xiangtian tore up his promise, which was enough to prove that he was a kind-hearted, affectionate, and righteous man. In the eyes of Rong Xiangtian and Luo Rong, not only was there no shame or gratitude, but a cold light of resentment flashed from time to time. Because in their subconscious, they took it for granted that if Zhang Fenjai honestly detoxified Yunar, they would not need to spend a 9-digit sky-high price to invite the poison saint in front of them, who was known as the king of hell in the Yang world, nor would they owe the favor of the Supernatural Research Institute and let them send experts to assassinate and retaliate. The reactions of Rong Xiangtian and the middle-aged woman made the black-clothed woman's eyes flash with a hint of disappointment, and then she turned around and began to detoxify Yunar. Using the method of fighting poison with poison, it is easy to dissolve the damage of the poison outside the body, allowing Yunar to restore her skin to a pink and tender skin, and a stunning appearance that is slightly inferior to Rong Mok, which also made everyone in the ward immediately show a look of surprise. But when dissolving the poison in Yunar's body, the black-clothed woman encountered a very difficult problem. That is, a trace of the essence of demonic power that maintains Yunar's vitality, instinctively believes that the poison invading the body is to harm Yunar, and immediately protects Yunar's internal organs and brain by means of consuming a large amount of energy. This not only made the black-clothed woman's method of fighting poison with poison completely fail, but also the essence of demonic power that could originally maintain vitality for 19 hours, with the accelerated consumption of energy, could only maintain it for a maximum of 3 hours. Alas! After retracting the jade hand pressing on Yunar's abdomen, the black-clothed woman sighed and turned to Rong Xiangtian and said, "I'm sorry, I can't completely remove the mutated poison in her body, nor can I bring your granddaughter back to life." As the smile on his face froze instantly, Rong Xiangtian's eyes showed a look of despair. Luo Rong, who didn't know the origin and danger of the black-clothed woman at all, angrily accused her. "You took the sky-high medical fee of 150 million from our Rong family, and you want to end it with a sentence that I can't treat you. Don't you take yourself too seriously and don't take our Wrong family seriously enough. Hearing Luo Rong's threatening accusation, Zhuang Jian's expression suddenly changed and she immediately pulled Rong Mok back to the door of the ward. Rong Xiangtian, with a look of horror in his eyes, slapped the wheelchair armrest and shouted loudly. Luo Rong, shut up. Then, Rong Xiangtian apologized to the woman in black with an extremely nervous look. Senior Poison Saint, my daughter-in-law was born in poverty and lacked education since childhood. Sometimes she speaks and does things without thinking. I hope you will not be angry. Seeing that the anger in the clear eyes of the woman in black had not diminished at all, Rong Xiangtian continued to apologize. As for the little money just now, it was just a small gift from Rong to you. Now there is a more precious gift. Turning his head to Rong Mok and giving an order, he quietly extended the ring finger of his right hand. Mok, hurry up and get the gift I prepared for Senior Poison Saint. After getting Rong Xiangtian's hint, Rong Mok immediately turned around and left the VIP ward and came to an ordinary ward. He ordered the bodyguard guarding the bed to take out a square box, and then returned to the VIP ward. Senior Poison Saint, please take a look. After reaching out to take the square box, Rong Xiangtian quickly sent it to the woman in black and gestured. Purely wild 100-year-old Polygonum multiflorum. When she saw a human-shaped Polygonum multiflorum placed in the square box, the anger burning in the eyes of the black-clothed woman was instantly replaced by a hint of joy, and she quickly reached out to take the box and said, for the sake of this 100-year-old Polygonum multiflorum, I can ignore her previous adventure. But only this time. At this point, the black-clothed woman looked up at Luo Rong, whose eyes were full of resentment, and warned with a cold look again. If there is a next time, your soul will be scattered and your body will be gone. Don't worry, Senior Poison Saint, there will definitely not be a next time. Rong Xiangtian, who was secretly relieved, quickly made a promise, and looked up at his granddaughter who had regained her peerless appearance, and asked with an unwilling look in his eyes. Senior Poison Saint, is Yuner completely hopeless? After putting away the square box containing Polygonum multiflorum, the black-clothed woman thought for a while, then looked up at Rong Xiangtian and said, actually, it's not that there is no solution at all. Please give me some advice, Senior Poison Saint. Rong Xiangtian, who had hope rekindled in his eyes, hurriedly asked. 2 solutions. The black-clothed woman slowly extended a jade-like finger and said with a slightly complicated tone. If you can invite Yi Xian, who lives in seclusion in the mountains and is known as a god who can save the world, and we work together to treat her, there is a 99% chance that she can be brought back to life. Senior Poison Saint, where does Senior Yi Xian live in seclusion? Rong Xiangtian immediately asked. It's about 130 miles from here to the Zhang family in Shushan. When Rong Xiangtian heard the address given by the black-clothed woman, a hint of joy flashed in his eyes, but he did not immediately go to ask for a doctor, but continued to ask. Senior Poison Saint, what is the second way? Turning her head to look at the cat demon and vaccine on the bedside table, the black-clothed woman stretched out her second jade finger and said. The second way is to ask the monk who is proficient in medical skills to take action again. Because through the spiritual power he left in the girl's body, I feel that the monk should have a way to save her. Hearing the second way given by the black-clothed woman, Rong Xiangtian closed his eyes and meditated while tapping the armrest of the wheelchair with his right hand. A minute later, Rong Xiangtian suddenly opened his eyes and looked up at Zhuang Jian and ordered. Captain Zhuang, please take Mo Shui to find the seniors of your institute now. If they haven't taken action yet, you will be responsible for arranging for them to rest temporarily and let Mo Shui go to negotiate with that kid alone. If they have already taken action, then you will come back immediately. Got it, Zhuang Jian nodded quickly. Afterwards, Rong Xiangtian looked at Rong Mok with a hint of determination in his eyes, and then he ordered in a serious manner. Mok, if you have the opportunity to negotiate with that boy, you can tell him directly that as long as he can bring Yunur back to life, in addition to the condition that Lodorong kneels down to apologize, I will not only give him a property that will allow him to live comfortably, but I will also marry you to him. The Best Physiognomist. Author, Yan Yun Yuqi. Chapter 257. In the VIP ward of the hematology department of the affiliated hospital. Although he had known for a long time that he could not decide his own destiny, and could even predict that he would become a bargaining chip used by the Rong family in the future, when he heard that Rong Xiangtian gave himself to Zhang Fengjai so hastily, Rong Mok suddenly felt as if he was dying of despair. Although Zhang Fengjai's various outstanding performances had successfully aroused her interest, they were still far from being enough for her to like him, let alone become a couple sleeping together. Of course, despair is despair, and Rong Mok also knows that she has neither the qualifications to refuse nor the ability to fight. Therefore, she could only nodded with her face as pale as paper, and then followed Zhuang Jian out of the ward. Ignoring Rong Mok, who left in despair, Rong Xiangtian turned to Lodorong and ordered. Lodorong, you stay and take care of Yunur. I will go to Rat Mountain myself to ask Senior Medical Heart of the God of Jishi to save Yunur. Father, be careful on the road. Lodorong nodded quickly and warned. Senior Poison Saint, I wonder what your plans are next. Looking at the woman in black with expectation in his eyes, Rong Xiangtian hoped that she could accompany him to Mao's mountain to invite the doctor to come out of the mountain. After all, with the Poison Saint who is known as the King of Hell in the Yang world following him, it is more confident to invite the doctor to come out of seclusion in the mountains and forests. But what made him very disappointed was that the woman in black chose to stay in the ward and continue to observe Yunus' condition. Daguan village, in front of the dry well. After nearly half an hour of adjusting his breath, Zhang Fengjai's energy had reached its peak, but not only was there no trace of joy on his face, but he became more solemn. Because the monk's sixth sense brought him an unprecedented, even suffocating sense of oppression, which meant that a powerful enemy that was far more powerful than him was speeding up. Fortunately, with careful planning and preparation in advance, he finally calmed down the tension caused by the pressure, and his solemn face returned to calm. As the sun began to set, a blood-red color began to cover the earth, like the setting sun. A middle-aged man wearing a blue robe, a middle-aged woman wearing a tight white skirt, and 5 young men and women in their 20s quickly appeared at the entrance of Daguan village. Looking up at the deserted Daguan village, the middle-aged man in Taoist robes said with a calm expression. The place where evil spirits gather, the hole where yin qi emerges. It seems that this place should be the place where Uncle Hungro calculated the target to be killed. Then, he turned to the beautiful woman in a long dress who had the temperament of a fairy and asked with tenderness in her eyes. Junior sister Tianyu, are you going to accompany your brother to the village to kill that kid, or are you going to stay at the entrance of the village and wait for your senior brother's triumphant return? Let's get together. Ignoring the tenderness in the eyes of the middle-aged man in Taoist robes, the woman in white clothes named Tianyu said with an indifferent expression. I want to see with my own eyes how superior the monks that Rong Xiangtian wants to kill are willing to pay 1/10 of Qingshan's management rights. The middle-aged man in Taoist robes, who had long been accustomed to the other party's indifferent temperament, turned around and preached to the 5 young men and women without paying any attention. According to the information provided by Captain Zhuang and Mr. Chiu, although the target of our execution this time is only 17 or 18 years old, his talent, perseverance, character and courage are no less than those of the core disciples carefully cultivated by our research institute. So, as elite disciples, you can join forces to fight the enemy, find your own shortcomings, and then improve yourself. Facing the preaching of the middle-aged man in Taoist robes, although the 5 young men and women all pretended to listen carefully, the look of contempt that flashed from time to time in their eyes showed that they not only did not take the teachings of the middle-aged man in Taoist robes to heart. And I didn't look down on that so-called genius boy from the bottom of my heart. In response, the middle-aged man in Taoist robes who was guarding himself also turned around without paying attention, and then stepped into the village. Coming. The moment the middle-aged man in Taoist robes and others entered the village, Zhang Fengjai noticed the modified feng shui layout immediately. When he suddenly opened his eyes, he took out a soul-fixing talisman drawn with his own blood from his sleeve and threw it directly into the dry well behind him. Then he looked up at the 7 people walking slowly, and he secretly breathed a sigh of relief. Because through the aura of the other party who was affected by the yin qi of resentment, he could clearly see that the 5 young men and women were only in the qi condensation realm. Even the middle-aged man in Taoist robes and the woman in white dress who couldn't see through their cultivation were barely on par with the security guard, and their life-saving trump cards with less than half of their energy left were enough to easily kill them. What's more, the feng shui layout he transformed with the help of the yin qi gathering place also has the power to severely damage and kill 2 to 3 strong foundation builders. Stopping 20 meters away from Zhang Fengjai, and then glanced at the 15 peachwood swords placed on the ground, the middle-aged man in Taoist robes asked with a hint of contempt in his eyes. Zhang Fengjai. That's right. While nodding to acknowledge his identity, Zhang Fengjai raised the corners of his mouth slightly and mocked. A monk from the Supernatural Research Institute, a lackey of Rong Xiangtian. Boy, you are looking for death. Facing Zhang Fengjai's humiliation, He Tianyu, a middle-aged man in Taoist robes who was more determined, just frowned slightly. But the young man behind them, who was wearing white casual clothes and looked very imposing, shouted loudly because he could not control the anger caused by his violent temper, and rushed over with a sharp sword condensed by his spiritual power. In response, the middle-aged man in Taoist robes and Tianyu did not stop him, and the other 4 young men and women did not mean to help him at all. Because Zhang Fengjai was affected by the evil spirit, he also exposed his cultivation level of the 8th level of qi condensation, while the young man in white had the strength of the 9th level of qi condensation. The sky and the earth are boundless, and the universe is strangled. Facing the young man in white who rushed over quickly, Zhang Fengjai shouted lightly and pointed directly at the 15 peachwood swords that had been integrated into the mark. Then, the 15 pickwood swords immediately flew into the air and greeted the young man in white. The first pickwood sword was knocked away by the sharp sword in the opponent's hand, and the second and third peachwood swords were blocked by the sharp sword condensed by spiritual power. But the next 4 peachwood swords, in conjunction with the 2 peachwood swords in front, knocked the opponent's sword away, while the 8 peachwood swords behind directly stabbed the young man in white at 8 vital points. Because the speed of the fight was too fast, the middle-aged man in Taoist robes and Tianyu did not take Zhang Fengjai, who was only at the beginning of the 8th level of qi condensation, seriously. So, when the 8 peachwood swords stabbed the young man in white, their faces suddenly changed and they wanted to help him, but they found it was too late. The Best Physiognomist. Author, Yan Yun Yuqi. Chapter 258. In Daguan Village. Damn it! Given the position of the middle-aged man in Taoist robes in the Supernatural Research Institute, although he would not bear any responsibility for the killing of the young man in white, he would be ridiculed and mocked by his colleagues in competition. If it is more serious, it may affect his future promotion and welfare benefits. Therefore, the middle-aged man in Taoist robes, who was furious, flashed and appeared beside the young man in white. His right hand, which contained powerful spiritual power, directly grabbed the peachwood sword that stabbed the young man in white to death, intending to use the peachwood sword that contained a trace of thought to destroy Zhang Fengjai's soul. But at this moment, Zhang Fengjai's light shout rang in his ears. The sky and the earth are boundless, and the 10,000 swords return to the sect. Accompanied by the steady light shout and the sword formula quickly formed by the right hand, whether it was the 7 peachwood swords that fell on the ground or the 8 peachwood swords that were inserted into the young man in white, they all returned to Zhang Fengjai's front at a gust of wind speed, and then continued to fall to the ground in the order of 1, 2, 4, and 8. Boy, you're looking for death. Knowing clearly that his move was intended to destroy the peachwood sword, Zhang Fengjai not only used the sword technique to take back the peachwood peach, but also deliberately restored it to its original appearance. This was clearly a naked slap in the face and provocation, and it also completely aroused the strong murderous intent of the middle-aged man in Taoist robes. The right hand containing spiritual power pushed forward with force, and a strong palm wind directly hit Zhang Fengjai. In response, Zhang Fengjai did not panic at all and quickly formed seals with his 10 fingers, and shouted to the sky. Yin-yang 5 elements determine yin meridian, yin sha turns into a dragon. Accompanied by Zhang Fengjai's shouting, a grey gas that was visible to the naked eye and exuded a cold breath quickly gushed out of the dry well behind him. The grey gas quickly condensed into a grey python with a body length of nearly 5 meters, and then opened its bloody mouth to swallow the palm wind while rushing directly to the middle-aged man in Taoist robes who was supporting the body of the young man in white. Although the grey python condensed by yin qi only has the strength of the 9th level of qi condensation, the ability of yin qi to corrode the body and soul makes the middle-aged man in Taoist robes dare not be careless and directly throw away the body of the young man in white, then quickly condense the mark with 10 fingers and shout. The golden dragon is stranded, and it turns into a dragon when it encounters the wind. A dragon with a body length of more than 10 meters and emitting golden light all over the body quickly rushed out from the head of the middle-aged man in Taoist robes, and then directly met the yin qi python rushing. The dragon has a strong yang spiritual power, which is the nemesis of the yin qi python. At the same time, the middle-aged man in Taoist robes used the power of the dragon condensed by Taoism to reach the foundation building realm. Therefore, Zhang Fengjai, who knew that the yin qi python was no match, directly cut his fingers and threw out 4 drops of blood, and then continued to condense the mark with 10 fingers and shouted. Yin-yang and the 5 elements determine the yin meridian, and Xiao Tian's soul becomes a soldier. As the 4 drops of blood that were integrated into the mark dripped onto the 4 black dog graves around the dry well, the paper-made heavenly soldiers and generals placed on the graves not only came to life instantly, but also quickly turned into giants with a height of 5 meters and a golden body. Looking at the 4 pairs of paper-made heavenly soldiers and generals, not only were they vivid like divine soldiers and generals, but their strength had reached the realm of the foundation building period. Tian Yu's face changed slightly, and she immediately opened her sky eyes to observe the 4 slightly protruding graves. When she saw the black dog corpse buried under the grave, a trace of doubt flashed in her eyes. The 4 young men and women standing 20 meters away were completely shocked by the various methods displayed by Zhang Fengjai, and stood there stupidly. The strength was far inferior to that of the golden dragon, and the yin qi was restrained by the vigorous yang spiritual power. The python condensed by yin qi did not even last for a second, and was directly torn into countless yin qi by the golden dragon. But when the golden dragon swung its tail and rushed towards Zhang Fengjai, a large sword over 4 meters long chopped directly at the golden dragon's head. If the middle-aged man in Taoist robes had not reacted in time and used his mind to control the golden dragon's rapid retreat, the knife just now would have been enough to chop off the golden dragon's head. However, just as the golden dragon had just dodged the attack of the large sword by retreating, 2 long swords over 4 meters long suddenly stabbed at the left and right sides of its body. Regardless of the length of the sword or the length of the dragon's body, no matter how fast the golden dragon retreated, it could not avoid the speed of the 2 long swords. In desperation, the middle-aged man in Taoist robes could only control the golden dragon to avoid the fatal vital position as much as possible through his mind, while swinging the attacking long sword with both palms. Puff, puff. Bang, bang. Accompanied by the sound of piercing and breaking, the 2 long swords successfully pierced the golden dragon, and the middle-aged man in Taoist robes also directly broke the long swords with his palms. The middle-aged man in Taoist robes, who did not feel any joy at all for breaking the sword, immediately controlled the golden dragon to retreat 7 or 8 steps in succession, then suddenly looked up, and his face instantly darkened, and a trace of fear appeared in his eyes. Because the one who just attacked with the long sword was a heavenly soldier who was nearly 5 meters tall and wearing golden armor. The one who attacked with the long sword was two heavenly generals who were more than 5 meters tall and wearing golden robes. What made the middle-aged man in Taoist robes even more terrified was that there were 3 identical golden-armored heavenly soldiers and 2 identical golden-robed heavenly generals on both sides. This is the Kunlun sect's magic to control the sect, the method of hooking the spirit to possess the body and condense the soul. Just when the middle-aged man in Taoist robes was afraid, a flash of inspiration suddenly flashed in Tianyu's mind while he was deep in thought, and then he shouted in shock. When Tianyu lost his voice and pointed out the origin of the heavenly soldiers and heavenly generals, the middle-aged man in Taoist robes, whose face also changed suddenly, waved his hand to disperse the golden dragon condensed by Taoist magic, and immediately turned his head and shouted to the 4 young men and women. "Leave here quickly." In fact, when Zhang Fengjai used the magic to condense the heavenly soldiers and heavenly generals, he could easily injure the golden dragon in the Foundation establishment realm, and the 4 young men and women had already been scared. So, when they heard the order of the middle-aged man in Taoist robes, they ran directly to the village entrance without hesitation. "Since you are already here, don't leave in a hurry." When Zhang Fengjai saw that the heavenly soldiers and heavenly generals condensed with the help of the Yinsha cave were far more powerful than he expected, he suddenly had the ambition to catch them all in one fell swoop. So, when he saw the 4 young men and women desperately fleeing to the village entrance, he smiled and tried to keep them, and quickly merged the condensed mark with his 10 fingers directly into the dry well behind him, and shouted hoarsely, "Yin-yang and the 5 elements, the world is turned upside down." Accompanied by Zhang Fengjai's shouting at the top of his lungs, not only did an endless amount of grey gas suddenly emerge around the village, but the grey gas was also mixed with silk screens of 5 colors. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. The Best Physiognomist. Author, Yan Yun Yuqi. Chapter 259. Daguan Village, the entrance. Just as Zhang Fengjai fully activated the modified Feng Shui formation, Zhuang Jian and Rong Mok, who were driving a silver SUV commercial vehicle, also arrived at the entrance of Daguan Village smoothly. Whether it was the dense yin qi stimulated by the Feng Shui formation or the colorful silk screen formed by 9,999 5-element spells, they had reached the level that could be recognized by the flesh. So, at the moment when the commercial vehicle was about to rush into the village, Zhuang Jian used her superb driving skills and a wonderful move of positioning drift to park the car dangerously next to the gray gas and the 5-color silk screen. Immediately afterwards, the cold breath emitted by the dense yin qi made Rong Mok, an ordinary person, immediately trembled with his hands on his shoulders, and the car, which was also affected by the cold breath, immediately turned off. Without any hesitation, Zhuang Jian kicked the car window and used her spiritual power to protect her body. She jumped out of the car holding Rong Mok and retreated nearly 20 meters before she could no longer feel the influence of the cold breath. Afterwards, Zhuang Jian used her spiritual power to help Rong Mok dispel the remaining cold breath in her body. She looked up at the gray gas and 5-color silk net covering the entire village, and her face showed an extremely solemn expression. "Sister Yan, what is going on?" Rong Mok, who had returned to normal, also looked at the gray gas and 5-color silk net covering the village, and her eyes showed an extremely shocked expression. "Alas!" Zhuang Jian explained with a sigh. "Mok, this is a Feng Shui formation transformed by using yin qi and talismans. How powerful it is has completely exceeded my cognition. Could it be that this was arranged by the strong men of your Supernatural Research Institute?" Although Rong Mok often came into contact with the cultivators of the Supernatural Research Institute and the independent cultivators who were training and surviving in the city due to the status and connections of the Rong family, She had never seen those cultivators and independent cultivators display the Taoist arts and means of calling the wind and rain, so she had never really paid attention to the cultivators who went against the will of heaven. Now, after seeing the grey gas and 5-color silk nets that were enough to cover the entire village, and recalling the coldness just now, she completely changed her contempt for the cultivators in her heart, and at the same time, she had a better impression of Zhang Fengjai. It should be. Although the Uncle Shishan and Uncle Tianyu who were responsible for killing Zhang Fengjai this time were both strong men in the foundation building realm, in Zhuang Jian's memory, they did not seem to be very good at arranging and transforming feng shui formations. Moreover, with their foundation building cultivation and strength, they didn't need to go to such great lengths to set up a feng shui formation to kill Zhang Fengjai. However, Zhuang Jian didn't believe that Zhang Fengjai, who was born as a casual cultivator, had the ability and qualifications to set up such a powerful feng shui formation. So, when faced with Rong Mok's questioning, Zhuang Jian nodded and admitted with a guilty conscience. Sister Yan, the strong men in your supernatural research institute are really amazing, Rong Mok exclaimed with admiration, not hearing the guilty conscience in Zhuang Jian's answer. But just as Rong Mok's exclamation fell, Zhang Fengjai's roar suddenly sounded in the grey gas. 5 elements of gold, wood, water, fire, and earth, the Pleiades star official points to the golden boy. Along with Zhang Fengjai's roar, on the grave where the 4 roosters were originally buried, 4 pairs of paper-made boys and girls suddenly came to life. At the same time, the colorful silk net covering the entire village quickly broke away from the grey gas, and then split into 8 5-color fishing nets and fell into the hands of the boys and girls. Then, 4 pairs of boys and girls holding 5-colored fishing nets, jumping into the village with happy smiles on their faces. Sister Yan, I seem to have heard Zhang Fengjai's voice just now. Rong Mok frowned slightly and asked in an uncertain tone. Without answering Rong Mok's question, Zhuang Jian stared at the 4 pairs of boys and girls with an unbelievable look in her eyes. Rong Mok had just met Zhang Fengjai, so it was normal that she was not familiar with his voice, but she had known Zhang Fengjai for nearly a month. After nearly a month of knowing each other, she was not only very sure that the roar just now was Zhang Fengjai, but also through the changes of the 5-colored silk net and the 4 pairs of boys and girls, she was more certain that the feng shui formation in front of her was from Zhang Fengjai's hand. His talent and potential, comprehension and perseverance were not inferior to the core disciples carefully cultivated by the Institute. Now, he has demonstrated such an amazing feng shui formation ability. Is it too reckless and stupid for the Institute to make the decision to assassinate Zhang Fengjai for a little profit? Zhuang Jian's sudden silence made the astute Rong Mok gradually realize that the roar just now must be Zhang Fengjai, whom she knew. Moreover, she also vaguely guessed that the person who caused the amazing changes in front of her was not the strong man of the Supernatural Research Institute, but the young man who might become her husband in the future, which also made her originally resistant psychology loosen a little. In the village. Brother Shishan, this is a feng shui formation with the yin and yang and the 5 elements reversed. It can isolate all breaths to form an independent space, which makes it impossible for us to escape easily and cannot seek help from the outside world. When seeing the grey gas and the 5-color silk net completely covering the entire village, Tianyu, whose face instantly became solemn, immediately reminded the middle-aged man in Taoist robes. Therefore, we must do our best to kill Zhang Fengjai who set up the formation, so that we can completely break the feng shui formation with the yin and yang and the 5 elements reversed. After hearing Tianyu's reminder, Shishan quickly retracted his gaze from the grey gas and the 5-color silk net, and then used his spiritual power to condense a long stick nearly 2 meters long, and nodded in agreement. Okay, I'll listen to junior sister Tianyu. After getting Shishan's consent, Tianyu also used his spiritual power to condense a sharp sword, and then rushed towards Zhang Fengjai. However, 2 pairs of heavenly soldiers and generals immediately blocked Tianyu in front of Zhang Fengjai. At the same time, The other two pairs of heavenly soldiers and generals fought against Shishan, who was also rushing over. With the Yinsha energy that was constantly increasing from the dry well behind him, Zhang Fengjai believed that the four pairs of heavenly soldiers and generals were enough to trap two strong men in the foundation building realm. Therefore, he ignored Shishan and Tianyu, who were fighting with the heavenly soldiers and generals, and continued to condense the mark while starting to stimulate the four pairs of boys and girls around the village. When four pairs of boys and girls holding the five-color silk nets condensed by the five-element spells began to chase the four young men and women from the research institute, his attention returned to the two foundation building masters. Whether in terms of cultivation and strength, or vision and experience, the stunning Tianyu is far stronger than Shishan. So, when Shishan barely resisted the siege of the two pairs of heavenly soldiers and generals, Tianyu not only had more than enough to deal with the two pairs of heavenly soldiers and generals, but also kept secretly looking for opportunities to attack him. The Best Physiognomist. Author, Yan Yun Yuqi. Chapter 260. In Daguan Village. Facing Tianyu, who wanted to attack him secretly, Zhang Fengjai raised his mouth slightly and pointed at the 15 peachwood swords placed on the ground in front of him. As the 15 peachwood swords flew into the air, he continued to use the swordsmanship of Tiandiwuji to cooperate with two pairs of heavenly soldiers and generals to besiege Tianyu. This immediately made Tianyu feel the pressure doubled, and he immediately wanted to retreat. However, in order to break the Feng Shui formation that reversed the yin and yang and the five elements, he either had to kill Zhang Fengjai, who controlled the formation directly, or burst out with powerful force to blast the gap in the formation in an instant, and then take the opportunity to escape from the formation blockade. Therefore, Tianyu, who wanted to retreat, immediately set his sights on Shishan, who was gradually at a disadvantage. Brother Shishan, with the heavenly soldiers and generals who are constantly provided with energy by the Yinsha cave, we can't kill Zhang Fengjai even if we die of exhaustion. So, we use the speed of our body skills to retreat to the edge of the formation, and then use the power of the heavenly soldiers and generals to attack the formation, so as to consume the blocking power of the formation. Okay. Shishan, who knew nothing about the formation, nodded in response, and immediately burst out with the strongest stick method to temporarily repel the heavenly soldiers and generals, and then turned and ran straight to the village entrance at the edge of the formation. At the same time, Tianyu, who also burst out with the strongest sword method to repel the heavenly soldiers and generals, also turned and ran straight to the village entrance. Wishful thinking. Seeing that Tianyu planned to use the attack power of fighting with the heavenly soldiers and generals to consume the energy of the formation, so as to break the Feng Shui formation of the Yin Xing and five elements, Zhang Fengjai flashed a sneer of disdain in his eyes, and immediately controlled the heavenly soldiers and generals and the peachwood sword to chase after him. Just when Shishan and Tianyu bypassed a second-floor building and were less than 10 meters away from the village entrance at the edge of the formation, 8 five-colored fishing nets were suddenly thrown out from the corner of the building and covered them directly. Get out of my way. Break. Seeing the five-colored fishing nets covering them, Shishan's long stick with spiritual power immediately picked up 4 fishing nets, and Tianyu's sharp sword with spiritual power condensed in his hand directly chopped at the 4 fishing nets. As the source of the gathering of Yin Sha Qi, the closer to the dry well, the more concentrated and refined the Yin Sha power is, and the more powerful it is. The farther away from the dry well, the thinner and more turbid the Yin Sha power is. This also leads to a considerable gap in strength between the heavenly soldiers and generals condensed by the Yin Sha power and the boys and girls. The 4 pairs of heavenly soldiers and generals have the strength of the foundation building realm, while the 4 pairs of boys and girls only have the strength of the 9th level of Qi condensation. At the same time, the 8 five-color fishing nets were just transformed from ordinary 5-element spells, and could not be compared with the magic weapons in the hands of the heavenly soldiers and generals. Therefore, the long stick in Shishan's hand easily picked up 4 fishing nets, and the sharp sword in Tianyu's hand easily cut through 4 fishing nets. However, When Shishin was about to rush to the edge of the formation, he unexpectedly saw 4 piles of meat and clothing fragments in the corner, and his eyes immediately emerged with endless anger. Because of the familiar clothing fragments, he knew that the owners of the 4 piles of meat were the 4 elite disciples of the Supernatural Research Institute. If it was just the loss of the white youth, he could use the excuse that there would inevitably be casualties during the training process to avoid the responsibility of poor protection. But facing the result of the annihilation of the whole army, not only there is no excuse to avoid responsibility, but also there may be more serious review and punishment. Even if Zhang Fenji's modified yin-yang 5 elements reversed feng shui formation can be used as an excuse to allow him to avoid the review and punishment of the institute, but the reputation of mediocrity will not only destroy his hope of promotion in the future, but also he will not be able to raise his head in the institute. When seeing the endless anger burning in Shishin's eyes, Tianyu, with a hint of joy in his eyes, quickly reminded him. Brother Shishin, first find a way to leave the blockade of the formation, and then turn around and avenge the nephews. After hearing Tianyu's reminder, Shishin forcibly suppressed the anger in his heart, and appeared at the edge of the formation, and then used the stick method to guide the attack power of the heavenly soldiers and generals, and continuously bombarded the gray gas. At the same time, Tianyu also used the same method to attack the gray gas, but when guiding the attack power of the heavenly soldiers and generals, she was constantly hiding her strength. Until Shishin was not only completely at a disadvantage, but also at the risk of being severely injured and killed by the heavenly soldiers and generals at any time, Tianyu used her spiritual power to control her face to be as pale as paper, bit her tongue and spit out a mouthful of blood, and then shouted emotionally. Brother Shishin, I can't hold on any longer. But in order to remind the leaders of the institute to value Zhang Fenji, and to avenge my nephews in the future, I decided to self-destruct my Danshan and soul to blast a gap in the formation, so that my brother can escape safely. When he shouted here, Tianyu looked at Shishin with tenderness in his eyes, and asked with a tone full of reluctance. I just hope that my brother will not forget that there was a woman who loved you and was willing to give everything for you in the future. No. Since Zhang Fenji controlled the Peachwood Sword to cooperate with the heavenly soldiers and generals to participate in the siege, Shishin had no doubt that Tianyu pretended to vomit blood and was injured. When he saw Tianyu willingly sacrifice for himself and heard her deep love for him, Shishin was moved and immediately decided to fight for a glimmer of life for his beloved woman. So, after he tried his best to stop Tianyu from self-destructing, he immediately burned the spiritual power of his Danshan and the soul of his sea of consciousness and said, Junior sister Tianyu, let me blast a passage for you so that you can leave here safely. Brother, please don't. Although she shouted no at the top of her lungs, Tianyu, who could hardly hide the joy in her eyes, immediately burst out with her deliberately hidden strength. When the Danshan spiritual power and the sea of consciousness soul burned to the limit and were ready to self-destruct, Shishin was ready to take a last look at his beloved woman, but unexpectedly found that Tianyu not only did not look seriously injured, but also showed the joy of escaping death in her eyes, which made him immediately know that he was deceived by the other party. Thinking that the other party would actually use his deep love for her to deceive his feelings and sacrifice, the furious Shishin roared and cursed before his body and soul exploded. Li Tianyu, you despicable and shameless woman, you are such a heartless thing, I curse you to not be able to escape the blockade of the formation and accompany me to the Nehi school. I curse you to be a secret prostitute in the next 9 reincarnations, and to be deceived and played by men forever. Facing Shishin's curse full of endless resentment, Li Tianyu's face instantly turned gloomy and responded. Wang Shishin, I'm afraid you will be disappointed that I, Li Tianyu, can not only escape the blockade of the formation, but also desperately impact the golden elixir road of the immortal realm and completely break free from the shackles of the 6 reincarnations. Just as Li Tianyu's voice fell, Wang Shishin, whose Danshan spiritual power and soul were burning to the limit, exploded directly.